The morning air in Pine Valley had that crisp edge you only get in the mountains. A thin veil of mist curled up from the creek, wrapping the pines in a ghostly shawl. My hammer struck rhythmically against the log beam, the sound echoing off the granite cliffs like a heartbeat. 3 days into building my dream, I was finally starting to believe this could be my fresh start. That's when I heard the crunch of gravel, too precise, too heavy for deer or elk. I straightened, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove, and caught the glint of sunlight off a pristine white BMW X5. The SUV moved up my dirt driveway like it had something to prove. When the door swung open, she stepped out. Tall, mid-50s, designer slacks the color of wet stone, a silk blouse in some calculated shade that said I'm expensive but not flashy. She carried a leather portfolio pressed to her chest like a shield. Her perfume hit me before her voice, sweet, suffocating, out of place in the raw mountain air. Like someone trying to drown the scent of nature with a department store. "Mr. Brennan," she said, though I hadn't told her my name yet. She crossed the rocky ground with the precision of a general inspecting troops. Her heels clicked against stones, each step a declaration of ownership. By the time she stopped in front of me, I could feel her measuring me, cataloging every detail, my beat-up flannel, the calluses on my hands, the sawdust on my jeans. "You have 24 hours to demolish that eyesore," she said, each word sharp enough to cut lumber, "or we're calling the sheriff." The mist seemed to pause in the air. I lowered my hammer slowly. "Excuse me." She opened the portfolio with a snap, flipping through papers as if she'd rehearsed this moment in her head a dozen times. "This construction violates multiple Pine Valley Homeowners Association covenants. No permits. No architectural review. No environmental impact assessment." Frankly, her eyes swept over the half-built logs, "This rustic approach will drag down our property values." I glanced around. Nothing but trees, cliffs, and sky. What community? I don't see any houses. She smiled, the kind of smile people give before telling you they're about to ruin your day. The Pine Valley HOA governs all residential properties within our jurisdiction. Your uncle, Silas Brennan, signed these covenants when the association was formed 6 months ago. You inherited his obligations. My grip on the hammer tightened. 6 months ago. My uncle died 8 months ago. Unfazed, she pulled out a cease and desist order and held it like a holy text. Remove all materials within 48 hours. Daily fines begin at $500 and double weekly. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of fresh pine from my lumber pile. For a moment, it overpowered her perfume, and I imagined it pushing her right off my property. Then she stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost gentle, almost. "Let me be frank, Mr. Brennan. This isn't the kind of neighborhood where people in your situation typically thrive. We maintain certain expectations about resident quality." My jaw tightened. Resident quality? She didn't answer directly. Her eyes flicked toward the photo of my daughter Emma tacked to a beam of the cabin frame. "I'd hate for your daughter to be embarrassed by any unpleasantness." That landed like a punch to the gut. She knew about Emma. She'd done her research, my divorce, my finances, everything. "Are you threatening my family?" I asked. My voice was colder than the mountain creek. Victoria Ashworth's smile sharpened. "I'm offering friendly advice. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Especially when you're clearly outmatched." She turned on her heel, climbed back into her BMW, and rolled the window down just enough to say, 48 hours, Mr. Brennan." Then the SUV was gone, leaving the smell of exhaust hanging in the air and the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had something far bigger than a hammer in my toolbox. And in time, I'd use it to burn their little kingdom to the ground, without striking a single match. "Brennan, don't make this harder than it has to be." Victoria's words still hung in the morning air long after her taillights vanished down the mountain road. I stood there in the dirt, the cease and desist order crumpling slightly in my hand. My eyes wandered from the stack of fresh-cut timber to the skeletal outline of my cabin. This wasn't just wood and nails. This was my second chance. And I'd be damned if I let a perfume-soaked HOA president take it away. Uncle Silas's voice whispered in my head, gruff, stubborn, the way he'd sounded the few times we'd spoken, "Don't let anyone push you around." It had been the motto of his mountain life, and now it was about to become mine. Victoria didn't even give me the 48 hours she'd promised. The next morning, the sound of tires grinding over gravel pulled me from my work. Her white BMW rolled up like a command vehicle. Right behind it came a faded, dented Honda Civic coughing blue smoke. Out stepped her legal muscle, Douglas Cranky. If the man was an attorney, I was a NASA astronaut. His cheap suit was wrinkled, his tie bore the kind of stains that come from a lifetime of losing, and his briefcase was more duct tape than leather. Victoria walked toward me with the confidence of a sheriff serving a wanted man. "Mr. Brennan," she called, holding the portfolio like it was the sword of justice. "You are hereby served with official legal documents. Cease construction immediately and prepare for financial consequences." Cranky shuffled forward, his hands trembling as he read from the papers. "Pursuant to Pine Valley HOA covenants, you owe $15,000 in retroactive violation penalties. Furthermore, you never received proper HOA disclosure documents during the property transfer, voiding your ownership claims. $15,000. On my own land." The air between us grew thick with the sour blend of Cranky's nervous sweat and Victoria's overpowering floral cloud. It was like standing in the world's most hostile greenhouse. I kept my voice calm. "I'll review these with my attorney." Victoria laughed, sharp, cold, and just a little too loud. "You can't afford an attorney, Mr. Brennan. Save yourself the embarrassment." The second their cars were out of sight, I drove straight to the county courthouse. The building smelled faintly of floor polish and old paper. Behind the counter sat Betty, the kind of county clerk who knows everyone's business but still manages to keep your confidence. She had a warm smile and the speed typing skills of a Vegas blackjack dealer. "Betty, I need property records for Pine Valley," I said. Within minutes, we were surrounded by maps and dusty file folders, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like lazy bees. The further I dug, the tighter my jaw clenched. The HOA had been formed exactly 6 months ago, 2 months after Uncle Silas died. The boundaries they'd drawn circled my property like a hunter's bullseye, encompassing only a dozen homes. My 5 acres alone made up 60% of their total land area. "That's mighty suspicious," Betty murmured, leaning over the maps. "Looks like someone drew those lines just to trap your uncle's land." I pulled more files, flipping page after page. Every single HOA member was either related to Victoria or worked for her husband's construction company. This wasn't about community standards. This was a family racket with a nice logo. And here's the thing, I might not be a lawyer, but I'd read enough Grisham novels to know dead men can't sign new contracts. And neither could I be forced into agreements created after I'd inherited the land. I called Sarah Kim. Her office smelled like fresh coffee and something sharper, drive, maybe. She was one of those attorneys who could slice you in half with a look. "This is legally impossible," she said, flipping through the copies I'd brought. "You cannot retroactively bind a deceased person to covenants created after their death. I've seen HOA scams before, but this," she shook her head. "This is brazen, even by their standards." She tapped her pen twice against the table. "We're filing countersuits, harassment, false claims, intentional infliction of emotional distress. And I want to know how they slid your property into their boundaries without notifying you." Finally, I felt the tide shift. But Victoria wasn't done. 2 days later, my neighbor Jake wandered over with a 6-pack and bad news. The smell of wood smoke from distant chimneys drifted through the trees as we sat on my porch. "She's got people terrified," Jake said, lowering his voice. "Called an emergency HOA meeting, didn't invite you. Told everyone you're some kind of drifter with a criminal past. Said you're dangerous." All lies, but in a small community, fear travels faster than truth. The next day, it escalated online. Victoria launched a Pine Valley Community Safety Facebook group. She posted a grainy photo of me, lifted from an old union newsletter, under the headline, "Transient Criminal Alert." The comments poured in like venom. "Get this predator out. My kids aren't safe. Sheriff needs to act now." Then she made her first real mistake. In her rush to show the HOA's financial stability, she posted their bank records publicly. $847,000 in special assessments, collected in just 6 months, from 12 homes. Over $70,000 per family. And not a single park bench, road repair, or clubhouse to show for it. When I slid the evidence across Sarah's desk, she nearly spilled her coffee. She just admitted to massive fraud. And she posted it herself. The very next morning, a county inspector pulled into my driveway. The man couldn't look me in the eye as he handed me a citation for building violations. "Sorry, buddy," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Orders from the top. Someone's got serious pull at the county office." As his truck rattled away, the metallic taste of corruption rose in my mouth. Victoria had crossed a line, using government resources to settle personal scores. That meant one thing: federal jurisdiction. Fraud plus public official misconduct. The alphabet agencies would eat this up. At 3 a.m., the war turned physical. The crash of breaking glass jolted me awake, followed by the nose-stinging reek of diesel fuel. I stumbled outside, boots crunching over frost-hardened ground. My construction site looked like a battlefield. My lumber pile had been scattered, beams cracked like kindling. The generator lay on its side, leaking fuel into the dirt, the chemical bite stinging my eyes. And on the access road, roofing nails glittered in the moonlight like malicious confetti, waiting to shred any tire that dared pass. Victoria had officially moved from harassment to sabotage. And that was a game she'd regret playing. By dawn, the message was crystal clear. Victoria was done playing courtroom chess. I stepped outside to find my truck sitting low on all four tires, the rubber slashed to ribbons. My phone buzzed with a new email, an official-looking complaint from the EPA. According to them, I was destroying sensitive wetlands. I stared at the attached map and almost laughed. The wetlands in question were a seasonal trickle of water that had been gurgling across my land since before Victoria was born. A creek so small it dried up every August. But this wasn't about facts anymore. This was psychological warfare. By noon, the next tactic rolled in, literally. Cars started appearing at the entrance to my driveway. Not blocking it outright, no, Victoria was smarter than that, but parked just close enough to make me thread my truck through with three-point turns and curses. The drivers wore polite smiles, sunglasses hiding their eyes. "Public road," one of them said when I approached. "We're concerned citizens. Exercising our right to park here." The air tasted like manufactured innocence, sugary on the surface, rotten underneath. An hour later, the safety signs sprouted like weeds. Official-looking boards, hazardous construction zone, authorized personnel only, appeared along the mountain road. They were convincing enough to fool Pete, my contractor. He called me in a panic. "Marcus, I've got 3 clients asking if I'm licensed for hazardous waste cleanup. Word's going around your site's contaminated." I could hear the stress in his voice. Pete was a good man, but small-town reputation could kill a business faster than a bad job. Victoria wasn't just attacking me anymore. She was turning my own community into a weapon against me. I'd read somewhere that the best con artists never introduce new weapons, they just use yours against you. That night, Sarah and I returned to the courthouse to dig deeper. Betty the clerk brewed another pot of coffee, the smell mixing with the dusty paper scent of decades-old records. Hours later, we found it, the heart of Victoria's scheme. 6 months ago, Mountain Vista Resorts had approached the county with plans for a $50 million luxury destination, spa, golf course, helicopter landing pad. The prime location. Smack in the middle of Pine Valley. And my 5 acres, perched on the ridge, would be the scenic crown jewel of the whole operation. They couldn't break ground without securing every residential property in the designated tourism corridor. My land wasn't in her way, I murmured, staring at the county maps. It was the key. Betty pointed to a line item buried in the planning budget. Consultation fee, $400,000. Paid to Community Relations Services. Sarah set her coffee down slowly. That's not consulting. That's a bribe. And just like that, the whole picture snapped into focus. The HOA fines, the harassment, the smear campaign, it wasn't just personal spite. Every day I held out cost Victoria and her developer partners hundreds of thousands in delayed profits. That night, I put my electrician's skills to work. I wired motion sensors and night vision cameras all over the property. If Victoria wanted to escalate, I'd catch her in glorious high definition. I didn't have to wait long. Around midnight, a pickup rolled down my access road with its headlights off. The driver's hoodie couldn't hide the jawline I'd seen at HOA meetings. He stepped out, carrying a red gas can, and began splashing liquid near my lumber pile. My cameras caught everything, including the exact moment he looked straight into the lens. Tommy Ashworth, Victoria's son. By morning, I was at the sheriff's office with a USB drive. Midnight arson attempt, I told the deputy. License plate and facial recognition included. By the time I got home, the concerned citizen narrative had crumbled. Tommy folded under questioning, and Victoria suddenly had a bigger legal problem than my cabin. But I wasn't done digging. HOA financial filings showed payments to security consulting firms that didn't exist, landscaping jobs billed from Florida, and legal fees so outrageous they could make a Supreme Court justice blush. Victoria wasn't just trying to deliver my land to developers. She was bleeding her own neighbors dry while she waited for the payout. And she was running out of time. The resort deal probably had deadlines. Cornered animals bite hardest. And they also make the dumbest mistakes. Her counterstrike came the next morning, an emergency injunction. A process server handed me a thick packet of papers that smelled of fresh ink and desperation. According to Victoria, I was building an illegal commercial facility to operate transient housing for undesirable elements. She wanted $100,000 in damages and an immediate restraining order preventing me from entering my own property. By noon, 3 county inspectors descended on my land, environmental compliance, building safety, septic evaluation, each scribbling down phantom violations. Rodriguez, the lead inspector, muttered under his breath as he photographed my wiring. Sorry, man. Orders from above my pay grade. Someone's paying big to make your life hell. The taste of corruption was metallic and bitter. But her lowest blow came that afternoon. My ex-wife, Linda, called. Her voice was tight, angry. Marcus, what the hell is going on? Emma's friends are showing her Facebook posts saying you're a sex offender. She's locked in her room crying. I froze. What posts? Some community safety group. Your photo, warnings about predators targeting kids. Is it true? Of course not. It's all lies, Linda. I'm fighting a corrupt HOA that's trying to fix it, she snapped. Because if this affects custody, a judge won't care about your conspiracy theories. The call ended, and I sat alone in Uncle Silas's workshop. The smell of oil and sawdust pressed around me. This wasn't about property anymore. She was trying to take my daughter. That evening, Jake knocked on my door, eyes wide. Marcus, she just posted an emergency alert, says you threatened to burn down the neighborhood. She's using a photo of you holding your circular saw to make it look like a weapon. The comments were a frenzy, call SWAT. Protect our children. But Jake leaned in closer. 3 HOA families told me privately, Victoria's threatening to jack up their property assessments if they don't sign statements against you. And the treasurer, Beth Morrison, has been asking where all the HOA money's going. She's found invoices for companies that don't exist. Payments for work never done. I could feel the plan forming even before Jake finished. Call Sarah, I said. We're done playing defense. Victoria's financial house of cards was swaying in the wind. All it needed was the right push. Sarah leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled, eyes sharp. If we can force an emergency HOA audit before she destroys evidence, we've got her, she said. Then she tapped the file containing Victoria's sex offender smear campaign against me. And Marcus, false accusations like this aren't just defamation. This is a federal criminal matter. We can hit her on 2 fronts. I nodded, but a different kind of revenge was taking shape in my mind. If there was one thing Victoria valued above all else, it was money. So I decided to strike her in the one place she couldn't afford to lose, her wallet. The next morning, I went on what you might call a reputation tour. I drove to every business Victoria's family owned, worked at, or was known to frequent. The auto shop. The hardware store. The little mountain grocery where gossip traveled faster than the morning frost. I didn't raise my voice, didn't throw accusations. Instead, I laid screenshots of her Facebook lies, my name and face smeared with the words, dangerous predator, in front of managers and owners. Calmly, Factually, I explained their legal liability for enabling or associating with that kind of defamation. In a town this small, your reputation is your currency. And I'd just introduced a run on the Ashworth family bank. By that afternoon, Victoria's own mother was on the phone with her, furious, demanding to know why the family was suddenly being turned away from the grocery store, told no openings at the salon, and finding their regular credit line at the hardware store mysteriously on hold. The fire she'd lit under me was now roaring back in her own kitchen. That evening, storm clouds swelled over the peaks, and rain began tapping against my cabin windows. For the first time in weeks, I felt the tide shifting. Victoria had spread herself too thin, attacking too many fronts at once, while her financial misdeeds started seeping into daylight. But I also knew something else: people like her don't go quietly. When desperate criminals lose control, they don't retreat. They blow everything up. The smell of rain mingled with the resin-rich scent of pine, pulling me back to Uncle Silas's words. The land has secrets, Marcus. More than you'll ever know. The next morning, I found out exactly what he meant. I was prying up warped floorboards in his old workshop, working by instinct more than plan, when my crowbar hit something solid. Not wood, metal. The clang rang through the dusty air like a church bell announcing Judgment Day. Beneath 40 years of sawdust and oil stains lay a steel lockbox, military green, heavy enough to need both hands. The combination dial was worn smooth, but when I spun in Uncle Silas's birthday, the latch clicked open like it had been waiting for me. The smell of time escaped in a single breath: old paper, stale tobacco, and the faint tang of metal. Inside were manila folders fat as encyclopedias, embossed corporate seals that gleamed like coins, and legal paperwork thick enough to choke a judge's docket. On top sat an incorporation certificate. Brennan Holdings LLC, incorporated March 15, 1998. Sole proprietor, Silas J. Brennan. As I flipped through the documents, the scale of what my uncle had done sank in. In 2010, when the housing market crashed and developers went bankrupt, Uncle Silas had moved like a ghost through the wreckage. He hadn't bought the houses, he'd bought the land underneath them. The dirt, the deeds, the titles. 47 properties in Pine Valley sat on land owned by Brennan Holdings LLC. 12 of those houses were part of Victoria's HOA. And every single one of those homeowners, including Victoria herself, was legally a tenant. Even more incredible, the rent checks they thought were going toward mortgages and HOA dues had been quietly flowing into Brennan Holdings for years. Victoria Ashworth, who'd been threatening me with fines and lawsuits, was 3 months behind on rent for her own house. I could evict her with 30 days' notice. Her entire kingdom sat on land I now owned. The bank ledgers inside the box told the rest of the story. Monthly rent payments to Brennan Holdings. Property tax receipts paid directly by my uncle. Road and utility maintenance covered by him while the HOA claimed credit. It was all airtight: corporate seals, notarized signatures, perfectly matched county records. For the first time since Victoria stormed onto my property, I realized I was holding real power. Power that could ruin her in days, not months. I could evict every ringleader who'd harassed me. I could sell the entire development to Mountain Vista Resorts for millions. I could burn her world to the ground, legally and quietly. But Uncle Silas's words pressed into my mind. Don't let anyone push you around. He didn't say push back harder. There's a difference. And that difference would decide what kind of man I'd be when this ended. I spread the documents across Sarah's desk under the warm light of her green glass banker's lamp. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the gravity of what I'd just laid out. Sarah scanned each page with the precision of a surgeon. "This is legally bulletproof," she said finally. "Your uncle was meticulous. Every I dotted, every T crossed. You are the lawful landlord of the entire subdivision." Then she laid out my options like battle plans. Plan A: reveal your ownership immediately, dissolve the HOA, end the war clean. Plan B: selective enforcement. Evict Victoria and her inner circle, leave the rest in peace. Plan C: the nuclear option. Go public, bring in federal investigators, expose every crime and burn the HOA's reputation to ashes. I stared at the papers, thinking about Emma, my neighbors, and the ones who'd been manipulated rather than malicious. "What about Plan D?" I asked. Sarah arched an eyebrow. Plan D. Use the leverage to actually fix things. Expose the fraud, offer reduced rents, give people a chance to buy their land outright. Replace the HOA with something that actually helps families. Her lips curved just slightly. That's not revenge, Marcus. That's leadership. While she dug into legal precedents, I called Jake. If I was going to drop this bombshell, I needed it on record. In his shop, the coppery tang of wire and the low hum of fluorescent lights wrapped around me like an old work shirt. You're gonna want this recorded, Jake said, helping me test a professional-grade audio rig. When you drop this news, you want every word documented. Driving back to the cabin, I thought about something from my early apprenticeship. The most powerful electrical systems aren't the ones that throw the biggest sparks, they're the ones calibrated to deliver exactly the right current at exactly the right time. Too little and nothing happens. Too much, and you burn down the house. This situation was going to need precise voltage. That afternoon, I met with Beth Morrison, the HOA treasurer, at the local diner. The scent of apple pie and fresh coffee wrapped around us, a sharp contrast to the poison politics outside. She leaned in over her mug, voice low. I've been suspicious about our books for months, Marcus. And I think I know where Victoria's bodies are buried. Beth's voice trembled as she set down my photocopies of Victoria's fake invoices. Marcus, she's been stealing from all of us while threatening our homes. But even if we prove it, what happens to the families who've sunk their life savings into these places? That was the moment I knew. Plan D wasn't just the right move, it was the only move. We weren't just going to end Victoria. We were going to rebuild the community she'd poisoned. Over the next 2 days, Sarah and I built a plan worthy of my uncle's legacy. Triplicate legal filings. Digital backups in encrypted cloud storage. Copies sent to federal HOA fraud investigators, so that even if Victoria burned down every file in Colorado, the evidence would live on. We created a presentation that would do 3 things at once. Expose Victoria's financial crimes with irrefutable proof. Reveal my legal ownership of the land beneath every home in the HOA. Offer a path forward, reduced rents, transparent accounting, and a roadmap to true ownership for every honest family. Before the meeting, I called Emma. Her voice was small, wounded. Dad, is it true? Are you really dangerous? I swallowed hard. No, sweetheart. Everything online is fake, completely fabricated. And soon, the whole town will know the truth. Silence on the line. Then, quietly. So, you're not in trouble. I'm fine. But Emma, I need you to understand something. When people try to hurt you with lies, the best weapon isn't more lies. It's the truth, delivered at exactly the right moment. That right moment was set for Friday night. Victoria had called an emergency community meeting at the Pine Valley Center, intending to put me on public trial. She had no idea she'd just booked the venue for her own execution. That night, I sat in my finished cabin, listening to the creek babble and watching stars appear between pine boughs. I felt Uncle Silas there with me in the cool mountain air. He'd kept this secret for decades, waiting for someone to wield it with purpose. Tomorrow, the truth would have its day. But Victoria wasn't done yet. Tuesday morning, I got an emergency court filing delivered with my coffee, a petition to have me involuntarily committed to a psychiatric facility. Her sworn statement painted me as a paranoid, violent lunatic, surveilling neighbors, threatening arson, muttering conspiracies in the dead of night. She'd even bribed 3 HOA members to sign witness statements confirming the delusions. It was a masterpiece of fiction, printed on official court letterhead. And it scared me, not because it was true, but because I knew how far she was willing to go. By noon, the fear campaign had gone physical. A convoy of pickup trucks parked just beyond my property line, half a dozen of Victoria's citizen patrol with hunting rifles slung over their shoulders. Not trespassing. Not saying a word. Just watching. A silent promise, step out of line, and we'll take care of it ourselves. Then Jake called. His voice was tight. Marcus, it's worse. The sheriff's planning to serve that mental health warrant this afternoon. He's Victoria's brother-in-law. He's bringing SWAT. I glanced at the security monitors. Every camera feed was lit up with movement, black tactical gear in the tree line, a slow crawl toward my property. The metallic taste of fear mixed with the resin-heavy scent of pine. This wasn't about enforcing a bogus order. This was intimidation, maximum force before the community meeting, designed to break me. But they didn't know two things. 1. Every inch of my property was wired for audio and video. 2. I had already sent that footage, and every shred of Victoria's corruption, to state and federal authorities 2 days ago. So when SWAT kicked my door, when they found me calmly sitting at my table with my hands folded, the cameras caught every second. The sheriff's threats, his admission that, this comes from the HOA president, the moment Jake's text arrived telling me federal agents had just walked into the county courthouse with my evidence. Friday night, the Pine Valley Community Center was standing room only. Victoria stood at the front, smug, clutching her clipboard like a queen's scepter. She launched into her speech about the dangerous man among us, but she didn't get far. Before you go on, I said, stepping up beside her, let's take a look at where your HOA dues have really been going. The projector lit up with copies of her fake invoices, her consulting fees, her own Facebook posts defaming me. Gasps turned into murmurs, murmurs into shouts. Then came the bombshell. By the way, every home in this subdivision sits on land owned by Brennan Holdings LLC. As of my uncle's passing, that's me. Which means every single one of you is my tenant. Including Victoria. The room went silent. Then Beth stepped forward, holding the signed audit demand. The vote to dissolve the HOA passed in under a minute. Victoria tried to speak, but the federal agents at the back of the room had other plans. The clink of handcuffs echoed through the hall as she was led out, sputtering denials no one believed. When it was over, I stood outside under the cold stars, Emma's hand in mine. The air smelled like rain on pine. The HOA was gone. The community was free. And for the first time since this started, I could breathe.